Hi and welcome to this video. My name is Miriam Mondo, in charge of training and career advisory services here at Corporate Staffing. And today we are talking about HR policies and just unpacking which are these top policies that every company needs to have. As usual, I am joined by Paminas, one of our lead HR consultants in this discussion. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Mary, for having me.
Yes, it's been a while.
Yes, it's been, but never. It's they say what? It's better than
Better
what?
late than never.
Better than never. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are talking about HR policies.
Yes.
And before we even highlight some of the policies that companies need to have,
Yeah.
someone is wondering what's an HR policy in the first place?
Yes. So a simple definition of a HR policy is that this is a document that governs the relationship between an employer and an employee. And to be more specific, it's an internal document. Because there are three parties when it comes to the employer-employee relationship. Number one, there's the government. And where the government comes in, it's in terms of the labor laws. These are the acts passed by parliament. Then we have the HR policy. So there are some things that the government doesn't set out. But the government gives us the broad relationship. This is the minimum that I need you to have. But then for a HR policy, maybe you can now go into details. For example, I'll give you an example. The issue of dress code. The Employment Act, there's nothing, it doesn't mention about dress code. So, but in a HR policy, you can be specific. You can say, for my organization, we allow you to feel free. You can even wear dreadlocks. You can come to the office in T-shirt. If you look at the issue of time, the government says an employee is supposed to work for a maximum of 8 hours in a day and 6 days in a week. It doesn't say that you're supposed to have a Sunday off. It doesn't say Tuesday. So that is why you find in some industry and sectors, for example, hospitality, you might find someone works on Sunday, they are off on Tuesday. If it's hospital, you might find someone has a night shift. As long as you're working 8 hours, the company is compliant with the government, and they'll have that catered in the HR policy. Yeah.
Great. And what are these now, the key elements of HR policies that every company, regardless of the size or the industry, needs to have?
Yes, good question, Mary. So there are some HR policies which are stipulated by the employment law. For example, disciplinary process. The law requires that you are trained in your organization. How do you undertake your disciplinary process? So that's a very important HR policy. Another important HR policy is to do with performance management. Again, this is an area where you find there's a lot of conflict between employer and employee. So the more direct you are on how do you go about with your performance management, the better. Then there's also the issue of the terms of service. For example, are you permanent? Are you contractual? How do you handle, probation period? All those kind of things. So I would say among the most important, I would say are those three. Yeah. But then there's nothing that prevents you from having a broad HR policy. So for example, when we are preparing the HR policies for our clients, there are some who tell us, please put something towards on gifts, put something on bribery, corruption, yeah, put something to do with the office relationship. What are the do's and the don'ts? For example, in the banking sector, because of the sensitivity, you'll find that if you are having a relationship, you are supposed to declare. If you're actually even married, you're not supposed to work in the same department, and it can be termed as an offense if you don't bring this out to the management. It's not to say that they will prevent you from getting married or in a relationship, but at least that is information that you should be able to share so that at least the company knows that you may not be compromised. Yeah. So I would say it can be as broad as possible. Yeah. And the most important thing is whenever you're developing a HR policy, it's not just a matter of going to the internet and downloading. It should be customized because it's binding. Yeah. For example, you'll find some employers, they go download, but they didn't know the intention that the employer had, the one who uploaded. So if you come now and, for example, you've said for performance management, you do it, let's say, thrice a year. So you as an employer, you'll be forced to adhere to that HR policy because it is you who's come up with it. Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
You've mentioned about you assisting clients with preparing HR policies.
Yeah.
I know as corporate staffing, being an HR consultancy firm, this is part of what we do.
Yes.
So maybe you can expound briefly on how corporate staffing services helps companies or organizations with formulating HR policies.
Yes. Before I answer that, it's important I say the benefits of having a HR policy. Number one, you are compliant with the labor laws. Like I've said, it's mandatory for you to have some of the HR policies. Number two, it helps with consistent decision making, because whether it's Mary or John or Godfrey, if they are making a decision regarding an employee, they have a reference point. Yeah. Then it also informs both the management and the employees of what is expected of them. So again, you find a lot of conflicts that we find in the organization is because there's a lot of misinformation, especially where in an organization that does not have a HR personnel. Yeah. So having said that, then it's important for every organization, regardless of the number of staff, whether you have 10 staff, 20. The minute for me you actually get to 5 staff, it's very important you have a HR policy. And then it doesn't have to be complex. It's a document that can be updated with time and as the organization grows. So in terms of where we come in, our work is of advisory. So we will come, look at your organization, look at the HR policies that you need, then we draft the HR policy. And when you're drafting the HR policy, we look at 3 things. Number one, we pay attention to the labor laws, because you cannot have an internal document which is against the existing labor laws. So we'll be able to advise you what are the current labor laws, and as you know, they keep changing. Number two, we will look at what are your wishes as management. What do you want to include? For example, I said the issue of time management. For you, you could say we have flexible working hours, or we report at 8:30 up to 5:30. Saturday, yes, so it's an official working days, but people can be able to take a break. So we incorporate your wishes. So it's a very consultative process. And then lastly, we're able to advise you what are the best practices now, depending on your industry and the sector. Yes. Then from there, we come back, we prepare each section, we share with you, you review, you go through it, you see whether it's a good fit. If you want anything corrected, we do that. And then after that, we are done with the document, we launch it. And launching means an employee has to sign saying that they've read, they've understood the context, and they are bound by this HR policy. Because if you come up with a document, you put it in a shelf, you cannot then task or make the employee accountable on a document that they've not seen. Yeah, so I would say that is the end, and we normally launch it by having a training. It could be an online training, or it could be a one-on-one training. Now, whereby we're able to explain the content, answer any question the staff might be having. And then from there, now it's a matter of maintenance. If anything changes, let's say there's you want to add a social media policy, then we can update the policy with time. Yeah.
Great. There's quite a lot when it comes to HR policies.
Yes.
That needs to be taken into consideration.
Yes.
So that you don't make mistakes.
Exactly.
Being a binding document.
Precisely. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you too.
Indeed, HR policy being a binding document, there is a lot that needs to be put in place, and it is important to always get help from a professional expert, and this is indeed where we come in handy as corporate staffing services. Feel free to reach out to us on the email address provided below. We will be able to offer free best advice on areas that pertains coming up with good HR policies that you need to have for your organization. We look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.